Hello and welcome everyone to Becoming Irresponsible, Playing with Your Problems, episode number two. Really excited to bring this one to you and to be joined with Rowan Cabelli, who is a personal role model of mine, someone who I learned from. I've had the privilege of being able to listen to some of his meditations, and just to have the pleasure of being around him is a real honor. And to describe in his own words who he is, what he does, it exudes a level of humbleness, which I find inspiring in itself. That he is just a yoga teacher and someone interested in exploring himself with an interest in finding deeper levels of ease and a happy life. He describes himself as a simple human. I love this because it is so humble. And in this episode, what we do is we use this term, as he calls it, which I like, unpacking a problem. And so it's a little bit different to what I normally like to do. And in this, he shares how you can look at a problem in different ways, and we share our own views on the idea of taking out and sort of the layers of a problem, or as he likes to phrase it, an opportunity, and seeing how maybe there's a different viewpoint that we can take from it being this awful thing that's in our life we want to get rid of, to being a way to really deeply connect with who we are and a part of us, so that we can live life with ease. So it's a bit longer than some of the normal videos, normal podcasts, but I really feel like it's packed full of interesting information. So I hope you enjoy. Hey, Rowan, thank you so much for coming on to this podcast. How are you?
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, thanks for the invite, man. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. So what I'm most excited about, because we've been having conversations about this, and you've been giving me different insights about how we can really get the most out of this conversation, and also share with the viewers, because wanting to be able to be of service to them, what they can get the most out of this session on playing with your problems, how it will be a little bit different, rather than going through sort of a almost coaching session. And with all your experience, I wanted to first ask you, and you can let the viewers know a little bit about your experience. How long have you been on this journey of self-discovery?
I guess about 25 years in one way or another. Starting out, very interested in kind of Tibetan Buddhist meditation. For about 6 years, I lived at a meditation college, and then from there, interested into yoga, which has been my primary kind of direction. As a kind of as a way of moving, but also as a kind of philosophical, I don't know, a way to understand, or I guess for me it's always been about some way a bit around just trying to be kind of like happier, or healthier somehow, or just kind of more at ease. I mean, the whole trajectory for me has been around that, and I'm exploring that in various ways. For about 25 years.
Yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that, because I feel a bit privileged in a sense to have been a part of some of your teachings and your meditations. And, you can never quite get a snapshot or a full view when you just share a snapshot of what, how you've gotten to where you've gotten to allow other people to really know what they can experience from learning from you. So I feel really privileged and honored to be able as well to have you on the podcast. In talking about problems, you have and I wanted to get into this first. You have an interesting way of sort of learning more about problems. You call unpacking. Would you be able to describe a little bit about what that means to you before we get into the next part?
What unpacking is?
Yeah. What does that mean for you?
Unpacking. Well, I guess the term unpacking I mean, in terms of just more of the meaning of the word, it seems to denote, doesn't it, I guess, a sense of layers, like there's more than just one surface recognition to something. And, you know, and I guess everything that we're feeling and go through, you know, is relatively complex. I mean, we seem to be very complex beings, and nothing's ever like, you know, clear cut and straightforward, you know. So I think unpacking means, I don't know, spending time with getting to notice, getting to pay attention, seeing deeper layers, really starting to understand mechanics of things, or maybe feeling more deeply, or you know, so I guess some level of letting initial diagnostics reveal more. I guess it's a simple way of saying it.
Okay. I'll just change the view up there to give everyone the opportunity to see us both. So thank you for sharing that, because I really like the viewpoint of layers. You know, a lot of people use the analogy, the onion. You know, we think a lot of times we become so attached to our problems that it feels like it's just this one thing. And that maybe sometimes a challenge of it for people who aren't as practiced, especially in the beginning of maybe both of our journeys, or as you have had so much experience the beginning of yours, it feels like it's just this one thing. And then you peel back the layer and you realize, what's this hiding? There's something here. There's more to this. And you peel another one. And, oh my goodness, I thought this is just, it was something simple. And there comes this experience of realizing there's a core. There is a core, you know, even though we peel, there's a core to it, which is something deep down that maybe we learned many years ago, or something that is been ingrained in us. And whatever we've done, we've put layers and layers and layers upon it to try and hide it for whatever reason. So I'd like to maybe endeavor to find out how it is we can go about this unpacking, unpeeling experience within our problems. And I think a good place to start would be step one. What happens if we're unconscious of our problem? How do we become conscious or aware that we even have a problem?
Well, I guess, you know, right from the word go, I'd like to keep the word problem in brackets. You know, I mean, that can also be quite a loaded word, right? So, you know, we could see, but I don't know, we could see we could reframe problem as like opportunity. We could see it as invite to integration. We could see it as a doorway to deeper ease. So first of all, I want to bring just some relationship to the word problem, because if we kind of invest in problems are real, they're a fixed thing, I've got one, if we've already made that completely solidified, it might, you know, it kind of, so I just want to leave that word being a little bit ambiguous, if you know what I mean. You know, but then I guess we could look at how do we become aware of things that are unconscious that are maybe not necessarily serving us, or something that's moving in the unconscious that some way is I'm not at ease with. It's not serving me or other people. You know, I guess I might look at it that kind of way, and you know, and I think it's pretty simple. You know, I mean, it doesn't work. You know, I mean, I think this is kind of like life's gift. Like anything that's not really ultimately real or true will ultimately break down, and somehow it will kind of bite you on the ass, right? So I feel that's, you know, I think it's life's job in a way to reflect back anything that's really not real on some level. And there seems to be only so long that we can kind of cover up, hide from, turn away from, ignore something which is obviously deeply not working, before it has to get kind of faced. So it seems to be like, I don't know, to me anyway, like a somehow some inbuilt mechanism in the intelligence of life that anything that's not ultimately true, but ultimately real or deeply serving, somehow becomes fed back to us. And I think a big part of that is the body. There's a teacher that I follow also called Adyashanti, and I love how he describes it. He talks about the body as being a truth meter, and somehow the body has some kind of intelligence to it. So almost like wherever you believe about yourself that's not ultimately true, somehow that's reflected back to you in the actual body itself. So even though we might not be conscious of something, when we really check in, it kind of shows up somewhere. If you see what I mean. So then it can become, just around, paying attention, I guess, to how I'm experiencing each kind of given moment, and then kind of going from there, if you see what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that, especially being a person who likes things to be made simple. And so I hear in that a lot of simplicity. And I'd like you to correct me if I'm wrong in this, but what I hear you saying is that there's an intelligence within our body, and almost this place of feeling incongruent with the truth of who we are, and it's almost this warning sign. I think of it now like when a truck is backing up and it's going beep beep beep, everyone knows that truck is backing up, so they know to look for it. And it's almost like there's a warning sign in the body. When you listen to it, it's quite prominent. Is that at all correct or along what you were saying?
Yeah, I think I'd say that, and with a danger of, making something oversimplistic, because, I think part and parcel of that would also be to, it's kind of like, this kind of reminds me of the topic of what we call, in yoga, we call this the battle between, not the battle, we call this the seeing between the Manomaya kosha and the Vinayamaya kosha. In yoga, we call it, so the Manomaya kosha is kind of like our everyday kind of thinking mind, so to speak. It has our conditioning, the way that we relate with things, the way that we perceive. I mean, our everyday kind of working mind. And in yoga philosophy, underneath that, there's a subtler conversation happening, or what they sometimes recall as intuition, or a deeper sense of something. And sometimes there can be a lot of confusion between, what am I actually tuning into? Am I actually tuning into a deeper intuition, or am I just lost in the workings of my kind of perceptual lens? And the perceptual lens, through how we see, can also create a lot of turbulence. If I believe something that's really not true, I can create a lot of turbulence in my body and then believe that that's my intuition. So opening up this question opens up, also kind of, it opens up a discernment or a discrimination between what is it that's showing up in my system, and let me notice where that's coming from. Is this coming from a deeper sense of something in me, like, or is this just coming from a certain way that I'm seeing something? Do you see what I mean? So I don't think it's as clear cut as if it shows up in the body, because my belief about myself shows up in the body, and so everything. The emotions are an amazing kind of way to make into feeling how we think, so we can kind of really experience it on a kind of visceral kind of sense. So I guess, so there's going to be a lot of ways in which we see things which are not necessarily based on any real truth, or that produces feelings in the body. But what I kind of mean is also, like, for example, if I kind of believe, I don't know, I'm not good enough, or I'm unworthy, or I'm not worthy of love, or something like that, or if somewhere along the line I picked up a kind of belief system, that having that kind of belief system on some level will show up also in the body, because it's kind of it's an untruth in a way. You know what I mean? It's like we're all worthy of love because we exist, basically, is that, you know, is a basic truth. I mean, we don't need to be doing or achieving or making something amazing happen, for example, to feel that we're lovable. But we can believe, you know, I'm only really worth of love if I look a certain way, or I get Botox in my lips, or if I have muscles like this, or if I da, 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 and I'm going to try to organize myself into that, because once I've got that, society will kind of deem me useful and I'll be loved. And that will also produce a certain tension and a contraction, you know, in our body. And if we're really honest with ourselves as we're doing those things, it just won't feel good. It's like something in this, the way I'm moving in life, just doesn't kind of feel good. And that's what I mean. At that point, there can then be unpacking. It's like, I've got to sense it. You know, I'm doing a certain thing. It seems like I'm doing this because it seems like the mind deemed it a good idea. I need to kind of create this look or that look or this kind of thing, or achieve that kind of amount of money or whatever that is. And, you know, that seems like a really good, healthy trajectory to be on. And once I've got that, and my mind's kind of telling me I'm pretty good, that it's all going to kind of work out for me. Yet when you kind of look at how it is for you working towards those things, sometimes there's actually more than that. It's like sometimes you start to notice it whenever the mind's leading that kind of charge, whenever it comes up with an idea, it might feel quite inspirational, like, yeah, I'm going to move this and it's going to solve all my problems. But quite often there's a different flavor to it. There are multiple flavors and facets to it. It's got an inherent belief in it that I'm not okay already. It's got an inherent anxiety. Will I get what I want? Will I not get what I want? So the trajectory of trying to achieve some of the things we get can be also fused with a hell of a lot of suffering and discomfort. But we might not necessarily really stop and notice that trajectory. It's kind of like we always seem, we might just think, it's once I have achieved, then all these things will clear up. And it's only kind of once I've got everything that I'll kind of then can relax, without actually noticing what other forces are actually moving you do what you're actually doing. Where's that coming from? How peaceful is that? How at ease are you in doing what you're doing? And that can be an interesting notion of reflection. Am I making sense a little bit?
So what I hear, to reflect back, is almost a self-evaluation, a self-evaluation, but maybe first a slowing down, because sometimes we're taking on these beliefs. Like when I heard you speaking, I hear all the beliefs that I took on, that I was living through for so many years, that I learned from my parents, my school, society. You must behave this way. You must say these things. You must project this kind of thing as a male. All these expectations. And what I hear almost is a slowing down, although I like to use this word carefully because it denotes all kinds of things. The matrix, you know, realizing that maybe all these things that we've been told aren't actually true to us. So it's a slowing down, getting off the treadmill and realizing we've been running like crazy to try and keep up with this carrot on the stick. Or maybe it's like a cheeseburger rather in this society, and trying to keep up with it. And it's slowing down, and then rather than getting back on the treadmill, you know, going down to sit on a chair and just taking some time to self-evaluate. How's that?
Beautiful, Haki. I mean, I love it. I mean, there's tremendous value in slowing down, you know, and that doesn't necessarily mean slowing down the speed in which we move in life, but slowing down for me has been an internal process of, I guess, being a little bit more in the moment. But I say that cautiously because I don't want to turn it into like a practice that we all then think, you know, but it's more like an agreement in yourself with yourself, because we are getting instantaneous feedback. That's what's so beautiful, that the body and life is reflecting instantaneous feedback in our dialogue now. Your words are landing in my body, my words are landing in your body. And we're getting these kind of triggers and energetic movements and emotionals, and it's triggering thought processes, and, you know, all these things are happening in this kind of really alive, dynamic space. And for me, that's just lovely to kind of somehow give that value. And it's like, and I can actually start to notice, you know, when am I being full of shit? excuse the language, or is what I'm saying to you aligning with really what feels good in my body, or am I actually telling you the truth, or what's my motivation in talking to you? Am I just trying to manipulate you into my way of seeing something, or am I actually really begging for your love and approval right now? And am I
Mm,
going to try to say something to you in order to get that?
mm,
So for me, it would be more like a slowing down would be my capacity to maybe notice some of the dynamics that are actually playing out in any given moment that in a normal moment we might not have the consciousness to recognize, and we might just be going through the moment in a slight freeze or red alert, or and
mm,
only be able to reflect on it in the future. Like tonight I go back and reflect on this conversation, but what I found incredible is just the kind of willingness to slow down, as you put it so lovely, in a way to actually be able to kind of notice and kind of welcome and almost like learn. And
mm.
I might not know exactly what's going on in any given moment, but there's something lovely in making space for something to be clocked, like,
Yeah.
little tension in the solar plexus. I wonder what emotion that is. Not like a massive spiraling thought process, but just, there's something moving for me here. I can feel that something has been triggered in my body. Or when you say those words, something softens in my body and opens. And when you say something, I feel very contracted and defended. And so I've kind of got this really beautiful way of kind of acknowledging what's already the case as what's revealing itself in any kind of given moment. So
Mm.
I'd relate
Yeah.
tremendously to slowing down from that perspective.
Wonderful. And I really love the way you've explained, the in the moment presence of what is being felt and what's being moved. And I really want to relate this to the viewers, because sometimes we can and maybe I'm speaking for you, and I'll do my best to try and speak from my own experience. But sometimes we can, feel like in saying that, I don't live in the present moment, or I don't know what that means by moment to moment feeling. And I want to make it, clear to you guys listening, that I believe you do. And it's the same way when someone says to you, you're an awful person, and then something goes inside you and says, it feels all tense. And you're like, that's not true. And there's something inside you says, no, I don't believe that. And sometimes it takes these really extreme moments to pull us into the present moment to say, I don't align with that. That's not truth. That is not truth. I know that I may do bad things sometimes, or I may not listen, or these all kinds of things, but I know that inherently I am a good person. And so it's like this. Just imagine, the more and more you notice the subtleties, the more and more that those apparent truths become more real to you. And so I'd like to just share that, in that sometimes we can distance ourselves, because I hear Rowan speaking, and he's speaking so eloquently and sharing in such, something is what I try and be very often, is, that moment to moment feeling what feels right, but it's challenging. And I don't want anyone to feel as if there's a separation here, as if you're incapable of doing that because you already do it. It's just sometimes a more taking more time to slow down, taking more time to notice these subtleties inside your body. How am I feeling about what's coming up for me today? Someone said to me something a little uncomfortable. Well, how does that sit with me? And that's a practice. And that's just so, like, that's the slowing down, the first layer, the step one. So I'd like to come to this idea of, once we get that first layer down, and first open it up, peel the banana and realize there's another banana inside the banana, and we open it up. And I found, for me, avoidance, and I bet people out there can relate, because I've spoken to some people about it, this avoidance, this procrastination, this distraction, that big P word, which is procrastination, seems to be so prominent. And I'd like, if you feel that relates to trying to unpack a problem and saying that's the next layer, how has that been something that you experienced, the wanting to avoid, or the noticing of the avoidance and the procrastination?
Yeah, beautiful. Um, well, on the two words come to mind, Haki. The first thing that comes to mind is Freud.
Mm.
You know, when Freud, well, the word Freud has come to mind. The word trauma has come to mind,
Mm.
and the word honesty
Mm.
has come to mind. You know, and so I maybe we'll start with the word Freud, and I'll just unpack a little bit around that, because you know Freud noticed that the egoic position, and I use the word ego without any kind of judgment, like you know, sometimes we have that term, he's got a big, she's got a, but I don't use it as a judgment in terms of like, I just use it as the sense of self, you know. So the persona, the
Mm.
personality. So Freud identified a whole variety, maybe 9 primary kind of defense strategies that the egoic structure has,
Mm.
and avoidance kind of being one of them, or just complete denial or disassociation. You know, when something gets a little bit strong, or when something gets a bit too much, we have a way of coping with it.
Mm.
Um, and you know, and I've kind of learned to see that actually is a very intelligent system rather than something which is necessarily problematic.
Mm.
You know, like as a baby and a child, it's if we were exposed to a particularly traumatic event, or something that we weren't able to cope with as a baby because we were solely dependent on our caregivers, then in order to survive, we would activate one of these kind of primary strategies. So I think I see things like you know, like avoidance or disassociation, or denial, or sometimes creating fantasy and bonds or whatever, as actually tools to get us through something, and
Mm.
they worked. You know,
Mm.
so actually they're really, I feel they're to be really honored. But what tends to happen is, as an ongoing thing, they tend to then, where they really want helped, they then tend to hinder.
Mm.
So as a child, it really got me through a whole variety of difficult situations. But if I keep doing the disassociation now, I'm not really going to live an emotionally integrated life. Or if I keep doing denial now, it's not actually ultimately going to serve me, even though I'm not going to critique denial as a strategy, because at one point that really helped me through. And I think that's really important when we understand trauma, even, and I use the word trauma from just little many things to larger traumatic. I also, you know, use the word trauma carefully, and so little things can be traumatic. Not receiving love or not feeling listened to as a baby could be quite traumatic for that child, not necessarily a big event, but the little things can also carry through. And so, you know, so having kind of said that now, it's the recognition. So if I come back to the word like honesty, it's kind of like the recognition that some things that I've used stop working. And this is what I want to tell you about life. When we started the conversation, kind of said, you know, life kind of shows you anything that's not true. It kind of hands that back to you. So this is, you know, this is where I've started. It's become very obvious to me. You know, I'd say it wasn't really until the mid-30s did I actually start to realize that a lot of the ways that I was moving in life wasn't really working for me. But it took me at least till 35 to even get an inclination that was the case. Until that point,
Mm.
just totally blind. I've just led a blasé kind of 20s, just caning it, having a great time, going around the world, traveling, off to uni,
Mm.
you know, trance dancing, doing all sorts of things as a kid, you know, and then
Murdering and pillaging as well.
yeah, well, I don't know how much to reveal, but yeah, you know, just doing what you know. I mean, I smoked pot, and I played around with drugs, and
Yeah.
you know, but it wasn't. It was just, I didn't have an overtly challenging childhood. I had my things like everybody. I've had I'd say a relatively fortunate childhood. You know, but I think everyone and anyone goes through life with some degree of trauma in some way. I don't think anyone gets unscathed. You
Yeah.
know, you know, hats off that we all can have diverse experiences, some a lot harder than others, of course. And you know, but even, you know, even with that, I would say that you know, things started really breaking down for me 35. I couldn't really emotionally relate. I was going through girlfriends, elements of life weren't working. I had immense frustration with
mm,
certain aspects of myself. It drove me into spirituality, to look into deeper elements of myself. And what I've realized, and I would honestly say probably every year that I think I can't get more honest with myself, the next year, I find and manage the way for that honesty to deepen.
yeah,
So I also don't want to make honesty like you are or you're not.
yeah,
For me, self-honesty has been something which has developed over time.
mm,
Sometimes I can be honest only with what I'm capable of being honest about. And sometimes I'm not even able to know what's going on. Some of the things that I felt inside, it's like I can be honest, but to a degree, but I don't really know, and I'd rather leave that alone. So I'm going to be honest on the surface, but I'm not actually going to be honest in a way that's actually really threatening my survival. Because
yeah,
when we're really honest, it can feel like really incredibly threatening. So that's why I kind of want to talk about honesty as a friend, because it's only really through self-honesty. It's kind of like one of our guiding lamps that's
mm,
going to guide us through the darkness
mm,
of anything that we're trying to kind of unpack, anything that we're trying to kind of get revelation on. Honesty is one of our fundamental friends. I think it was Freud that said something like, we could kid ourselves forever. You know,
mm,
Denial is kind of like one of the ego's amazing defense strategies, and we could just keep ourselves asleep for a long, long time through different levels of just not willing to go there. So I think you've got to be interested in wanting to know the truth. You've got to be really interested in being truthful with ourselves, because ultimately at the end of the day, we are only being truthful with ourselves,
yeah,
and that seems to be key to any kind of moving into what might be unconscious material.
mm.
And so I talked about Freud. I talked a little bit about like honesty. What was the third word I mentioned? I forget
You
even.
also mentioned trauma, but you touched on that a little bit.
Yeah. Maybe that's enough around that.
Mm.
Maybe that's enough for that segment. Does that feel?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. What I get from it whenever I hear, because that's where truth is landing for me as you share that, and I hear this, and I tend to share this a lot with my clients, and I share this as much as I can with myself and my inner child, who I like to have a lot of dialogues with. And what I gathered from what you were saying is that, this denial, it was safe, it was okay, it was needed at one point, and it was very much a part of a toolkit that as children we used to help us. um, Imagine, and for the viewers, imagine you as a child and you learning that maybe your parent isn't capable to raise you, and just getting like a very small experience of that. And even as kids, getting into, maybe it's the pubescent years, is we are designed to leave. That's ingrained with us, is we're meant to leave. Um, and we start to then see the faults in these caregivers who are there who are supposed to be perfect, and many years ago we saw them as perfect. And so why would we ever, when we see someone as perfect, think that they may not have the best for us? And it's, if we were to really take that in as a child, or whatever age, as a kid, and really say, oh my goodness, my parent, or parents or caregiver or teacher, whoever it is, they aren't capable of loving me and looking after me, that would create a really scary world. And so this, as you said, the principles, or emotions, or whatever it is that you had said,
Yeah,
that Freud,
the egoic defense strategies.
egoic defenses, yeah, that Freud put forward. I mean, how supportive must those have been for us as a child? But now we grow up and we're told that we're grown up, yet we don't have any education. We have education, but we don't have any education how to let go of these, this denial, this distraction, these what were once very kind, giving structures. Now they're no longer really needed on a day-to-day basis like they were when we were younger. So and now we're left in this world in what's now feels like even more of a scary place, because we think, I'm alone with my mind. This isn't fun. And so what I really hear from all that is it's, for anyone who finds themselves constantly beating themselves up, they're procrastinating, they're denying that they have a problem. I find this incredibly liberating. I felt like I had wings when you were sharing it and I was just spreading it open. It feels liberating to know that that's okay. That we've been practicing denying, we've been practicing procrastinating, we've been practicing avoiding for so many years. And now we come to the world and we've never been taught that it's, that's a natural part of our life. And now we expect to be rid of it. I can breathe deep. I can feel refreshed because I'm not alone. This is a part of my evolution. And so I hear that and I feel liberated. I hope other people feel liberated knowing that, okay, that's okay that I feel that. And so we peel back another layer, a layer of this problem or this opportunity as you, you like to maybe change a little bit of the perspective on it. And we think, okay, so now we're ready to face the next part of it. We're ready to face what comes next, and really saying, okay, I'm going to accept that there's denial. I'm going to accept that. What comes next for you in peeling the layer? Because I feel like there's more like this trap of, where do I start? What do I do next? Do I go for a walk? Do I journal? Do I talk to a friend? Do I shout from the rooftops, hey, help me? Where do you feel is next?
This is what's interesting is I don't see this as a sequential thing. So it's interesting to us to discuss this topic because it's wide open and we can come in at this in any different perspective. The perspective that's coming to mind to me now is and one which may be very useful or has been very useful for me. It's to start to get an inclination that sometimes the responses that we have aren't necessarily directly caused by the thing that's happening right in front of you. So I think for me, that's a really amazing thing to understand and start to reflect on a little bit. Like, and this opens up a whole trajectory of seeing around, subjective experience, like unique perspective and subjective experience, which means 5 people in a supermarket on a busy Saturday afternoon, the mother with 3 crying children, and it's really hot, massive queues, the manager rubbing his hands together because he's about to get a big bonus. Everyone's experiencing that. The checkout lady that's been working for 8 straight hours couldn't have a break, whatever. And so each person's subjective experience is totally unique. And so that's one element that could be really useful to really take on board. Like, wherever I am, whatever's happening around me, each person is having a completely unique experience of this, depending on completely their own set of subjective experiences, all the way from way back when. And I think that's incredibly powerful because you start to get a sense of the way that I'm experiencing it doesn't mean it's how it actually is. Like, what's true? What's true in that supermarket scenario? Well, every perspective is true from the perspective in which it's seeing. So the perspective is true from the mother. She's having a pretty hellish experience. She's got 3 kids to manage. Her perspective is really true of that supermarket, but her perspective is only true from the lens of her perspective. And the supermarket guy, the manager who's thinking, right, it's busy, I'm going to get a nice fat bonus, is true from his perspective. And so that's one element of this. Is, it can be interesting to start to realize that all experience is subjective, and I'm seeing through a particular lens now, and this particular lens that I'm seeing through is unique to me. Now, it doesn't actually mean that I'm actually seeing things as they are. I'm just seeing them through the lens in which I'm seeing them through, and this is a big one. This is a big one to take on. I mean, I remember getting taught this in yoga, and it was kind of like it was the argument around the 3 people holding the elephant. I don't know if you've heard this before. So someone's got the leg, someone's got the tail, someone's got the ear.
Yeah.
And they're having a debate, and the guy's like, Hulk got the leg, and he's like, you don't know what the elephant's like. I'm the truth holder. The elephant is big, it's strong, it's round. I can put my arms around it. You know, this is the elephant. And the person who's holding the ear says, sorry, my friend, you think you know everything, but you know nothing. The elephant is thin, it's wispy, it's flappy. I know because it's my experience. And this is, and then the one who's got the tail is like, God, you two are so ignorant. If only you knew what I knew. It's thin, there's a bristly bit at the end. You know, and what's incredibly beautiful is that they're all right and they're all wrong simultaneously.
Yeah.
Nobody's got the deeper perspective, and yet they're each of their own perspective has validity. And what I wanted to bring around sometimes is like so that's kind of one part, that's one fragment of this, and another fragment would be,
just to quickly, for anyone who maybe is getting confused about the truth of that they're all right and they're all wrong. It's that analogy of when you see a 6 and a 9, one person standing in front and they see a 6, and the other person says it's a 9, and they say, no, it's a 6, no, it's a 9. And they're both on the other side seeing something. It's very much the same.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, just another way of saying the same thing. That that a perspective has a certain truth, and the problems tend to come when my perspective is right, yours is wrong, but their perspective is right through their lens, and this perspective is how I experience it through this lens. And but what I was alluding to was I wanted to give that as a little prelude. But what I've noticed that sometimes if I'm in conversation with somebody and they have a certain point of view and they're talking about something and I start to get triggered, I go into some kind of trigger. I'm getting hot. My stomach is clamping down. My jawline is starting to kind of like, and it's very easy to kind of like conclude that person is making me feel kind of like this. This situation is responsible for this feeling. And, and it's very, egoic perspectives can conclude, you're making me feel, I don't like it when you're around. When you're around, you just make me feel so uncomfortable. If I just don't hang around with you anymore and I surround myself with the people that I kind of like, if I start to manipulate my life, you go, you can come, you can go, you make me feel good, you make me feel not good. And we tend to do that a lot in life, without really realizing that it's not really like that. It doesn't really work like that. We try to do it, but it's very common for the human to work through a tremendous amount of control. I'm just going to control everything. I'm going to control you. I'm going to control me. I'm going to control, because I want an easy life. And, and we feel that that's the way that's going to do it. If I just control everything to the way I want it, I can kind of relax. But it's like, the Buddhists would say it's kind of like trying to cover the world in leather if it's full of broken glass, rather than just covering the soles of your feet. It's like you can't just control everyone and everything. Imagine 6 billion people trying to control everyone, trying to make the world look the way that for them, it's not gonna. So it's a good, I'm kind of spending I'm trying to unpack something a little subtle here. So, so someone's talking and I have a trigger response, and what can be interesting is like, I wonder what it is about this conversation that's eliciting such a strong response. And what I've noticed, it's taken me a long time to start to even get my head around this, that a lot of the time what I'm actually feeling, particularly if it was a very strong emotion or what I would call a trigger, is most of the time something in me that's unresolved, that's just brought up by this kind of conversation. So it's almost like there's something in this dialogue now, or there's something in this conversation, or there's something that's happening here that's eliciting a really strong reaction in me. And it looks as though that situation is the cause of the reaction. But when I look back, I'm only really having a strong reaction because it's something unresolved from way back when that's getting a salt rubbed into the wound again. So I would say that that's a really good, because we're looking at steps, aren't we, to unpack things, or steps to look at things. I would say that that's really important. It's like when things happen in life and we're kind of a little in the moment, I'm aware that there are certain things going on in my body, my temperature's changing, my jawline's starting to get tight, I can feel myself getting a little agitated, there's a whole variety of stages that my body's going through. Sometimes we're completely oblivious to that until the storm is raging,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So there's real value in kind of like slowing that down a little and starting to notice a bit more about in the moment to moment experience of,
Mm.
because we are only in the moment. I know it's sold as a practice, but there is only the moment. When you look, that's all we ever actually only have. So it's not that we can do or not do. There only ever is the moment. That's it. Period. So you're always in the moment. You're always now. It's always now. You're always here. And the body's unpacking stuff. In any given moment, things are being revealed, and it can be interesting to reflect on where are these emotional reactions, or where are these really big judgments, or whatever. What are their roots?
Mm.
What's under? Where? I wonder where this one comes from. I'm experiencing, and what's so amazing about that? Just to kind of finish off, because I don't want to talk for too long without giving you a chance to also feedback and reflect.
Mm.
But this reminds me of a horrible teaching that Swami Satchidananda, one of my yoga teachers, I call it, I say it's horrible, but it's actually beautiful. But I found it horrible because it's painful, because
Mm.
he's like, whenever you kind of like blame someone, whenever you point your finger, you're making me something, there's always three fingers pointing back at you. It's like, no, surely not. You're definitely the cause of this.
Yeah.
And there's three fingers pointing back going, look, buddy, there might be something in you that you need to see
Yeah.
here. And I was like, oh, it's so painful. It's not. It's definitely you're the cause of everything that's a distress for me. I've got no responsibility in this whatsoever.
Oh, yeah.
And every single time, and it's like, oh my God, I've got to look into me again. No, this can't be me. This is definitely you and the problem of the world and the
Yeah.
climate and the government's fault, and it's everyone's fault apart from me. And no, I bloody refuse to look. And it can be very interesting and it's not even that you're to blame. It's not even that you're at fault. It's more that there may be just something unresolved in you that gets projected outwards and reflected back that hasn't quite found resolution. And it's a process that's going to happen inside of you, rather than feeling that I'm going to find resolution through trying to manipulate and control the outer world, which is very, very common, and which is quite often what we try to do.
And it's, as in responding to your last point, it's very challenging because, at least in my view, blame begets blame. So you start pointing the finger and saying, hey, it's you. Then you think, well, someone has to be blamed here, because that's how I learned to deal with life. A lot of times it's learned because someone else, we're all victims of victims. Someone points the problem at you, and you're like, okay, so someone's blaming me. That means I have to also blame someone else, because none of this is my own, because none of that was their own. It's always, okay, who can I point the finger at now? It becomes a aggressive world when we start pointing fingers.
But that's beautiful, Haki, because we're living this culture, right? This is the culture that we're in now. We're in a blame shame culture of who's to blame, and I see it as so emotionally young. That whole structure, it's so kind of like it's like passing the buck in,
Yeah.
and as long as we can pin the blame on someone, and then we can use the words, we can never repeat that mistake again, as if that's what the human. It's so flawed. It's so ridiculous on so many levels, this culture, and it stops politicians being real. It stops humans being human. It stops us all going, look, you know what? We all make mistakes, and like who doesn't cast the first stone? You know what I mean? It's like, come on, you can't be doing that one. But everyone gets so outraged, and it's like, who do we pin this on? It's like we all need to take a little bit of responsibility for our own collective trauma around this. Anything that gets evoked, let's all look inside and see what each of us are bringing to the mix.
Yeah.
And I just want to quickly, it's probably a good idea here to bring in this beautiful thing that I saw with this trauma, a guy that works with trauma called Gabor Mate. He's blinking brilliant. And he was giving an audience, he had this live studio audience, and he was taking people through processes, and he was talking about trauma, and he was unpacking real life situations. And somebody phoned in, or somebody wrote on the chat, because they could also have live chat comments, and somebody wrote in, what a crock of shit you're talking about, something like that, right? This is and wrote some kind of comment, and it came up, and Gabor I think, saw this, and he decided to engage with the caller, with the blogger.
Mm.
And it was so incredibly potent, because he said something like, "Hey, my friend, I can see that my words," or whatever it is, "when you use those words, it's triggering in me pain and trauma that I know I have. Your words are triggering in me my need to be loved from when I was a kid, and my parents, and so let's open up a dialogue around this. What are my words triggering in you?" And you see what I mean? And all of a sudden, it stops a direct attack. This guy was just, whoom, and Gabor was like, "Yeah, your words, when you said that, I felt this." And he didn't defend. It was like, "Your words are impacting me in this kind of way. And I think this is why. And this is the trauma that I'm carrying, that your words are striking. What trauma is it in you that my words are striking?" And you're just left with owning your experience. You're not going to dump it onto someone else, which is
Yeah.
what this blame culture is doing a lot of the time. We're just kind of dumping our projections onto everyone else.
Mm.
And that was,
Wow.
a beautifully profound moment.
I love that. Even when you were sharing that, just his willingness to be so honest, especially someone who's like, and I'm once again privileged to know a little bit about Garamante. But for anyone who doesn't know, he's quite a big figure in whatever world this is called. And for him to be able to say, "I've got my own stuff. This is, you're triggering me. Whoever you are, you're triggering me." And then it just is. It opens up such this. Wow, this person who I wanted to have this fight with is basically saying they're just as flawed as I am. And I'm reminded, I believe, and someone who maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but there's something called Aikido, which is a certain type of martial art, which is for conflict resolution, but without fighting it. So the fighting is the last resort, and it's done with words. It's how can we most compassionately create a solution? And violence is like at the bottom of the list of compassion. And it's, you treat, you try and figure out how can we come to a compassionate resolution, even though you're feeling what you're feeling, is there's so much rage and anger there. And I have a few other thoughts that came to my mind when you're sharing before. The first one is about this idea of we're in a society as toddlers. When you said this sort of this emotional immaturity, I immediately got this view of that we're all just a bunch of toddlers. This all the ways in which is really, and I'm going to touch on this in a second, is reacting over responding. When we react, there's no conscious level of, okay, maybe this isn't the right way to speak, or maybe this is coming from a place of inside me that I haven't looked at yet, and I'm just throwing it out there. I'm imagining now, a bunch of chimpanzees throwing poop at each other. It's like that's how we're reacting, is we're not thinking, take that. Oh, maybe that's not a very nice thing to do. Wait, why am I throwing? What is this crap in my hand? And when we come from a place of response, we're checking in. We're saying, this is what I'm feeling. Okay, I'm not going to throw that at you. Or what we use in the spiritual world is projecting. I'm not going to project my crap, my chimpanzee poop at you, because, well, this is my own. It's my own. So, I mean, not to smear it in my own face, but I'm just going to put it down. And coming back to this triggering, this, because I think it's a very common word, common phraseology, but what I've found it to mean is when we feel this this sense of trigger, and especially as almost a trap, as we were speaking about, and you were eloquently saying, living moment to moment, what's coming up for me. And when we talk about as spiritual beings or beings trying to live in the moment, someone says something to us and all of a sudden we feel this feeling, and if we're living in the moment, isn't that feeling coming from them? And it seems very easy to say, as I'm a being who's living in moment to moment and feeling what's coming up as I am right now, then this feeling must be from you and it must not be my own. And therefore I'm going to blame you and say, get away from me, or I'm not going to spend time with you. And it's a really subtle, what I hear you saying is it's very subtle to then once again unpeel another layer, which is, okay, it's that self-inquiry that, if I'm feeling this and I felt this 5 or 6 times and it's all from different people, different experiences, who's the common denominator? What's the common factor here? It can't be them if I'm being really honest. I can lie to myself and deny, but that's gotten me so far, and I'm ready to give it up because that was step 2. That was before. And so we come to this place of, okay, maybe this is me. And then it's that subtle, they did this and I felt this way. And there's always there's that core belief, as you're saying, that every time I've looked in, where are the roots? Where are the roots? Where are the roots? And so often when I've really taken the time, and I'll put my hands up and say, I don't take the time sometimes. I'm human. I distract, I deny, these all come up for me. But when I take the time, there's so much time, there's this inherent belief of I'm not enough. This person has triggered something inside me, and because of that, I'm not enough. And it's taking that time to really just say, okay, if this is happening over and over, what's happening here? What's going on inside me? Where is this coming from? Where are the roots? And I like that word you use. Where are the roots? Where are the roots? I wanted to finish on one last part, which is about this idea of a battle. And this is what a lot of times it feels like is, we've gotten to this point, and if you really, I want to honor you, the listener, who has gotten to the point, because it's not an easy feat of first becoming conscious, especially in a society that doesn't promote consciousness. It's an uncomfortable experience, and there's not generally a whole lot of support. So if you become conscious, and then you're also willing to move past these feelings of or these structures of denying, of distracting, of avoiding, you've moved past that. You've also allowed yourself to move past these subtle layers of, okay, I'm going to own this. I'm no longer putting the finger there, and I'm going to lovingly put it at myself rather than blaming yourself, lovingly putting the mirror at you and saying, okay, what's going on? You've done all that. You're like, okay, suit up, armor up, get out the weapons. It feels like it's a battle because it's a long stretch. It feels like it's so much to get to. So I wanted to finish with this question. How do you feel about, or what are your thoughts about this battle that we get into with our mind when this problem or this opportunity, we get past those layers?
These are enormous questions.
Yeah.
These are, well, again, this is so enormous, and we could talk about this for hours, and we can unpack this in a variety of different ways for hours. But just for the name of coherency, and in the name of keeping it relatively succinct, words that come together when you say like that is, the first phrase that comes to mind is like the overuse of our intellect. Because we tend to feel that if I understand everything, we sometimes believe that understanding will bring resolution. If I can just figure it out and get to the bottom of it. But I've learned that regardless of how much I've understood, it doesn't actually bring me physically, bodily, being a sense of being at ease or settled. And it took me a long time really to realize that you can't really find emotional resolution through the intellect.
You said the intellect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you said the internet. Yeah, the intellect.
You can't think your way through something, come to some mental resolution and feel that your emotional energy is all going to feel like it's harmonized. So quite often we're pushed into the mind almost like a byproduct of not really wanting to feel something.
Mm.
So I'll kind of get pushed up into cognition, I'll get pushed up into repetitive thought processes.
Mm.
And it feels like I need to kind of somehow battle my way or unpick or see through or navigate through a
Mm.
quagmire of conflicting thoughts. And this is a whole topic, this is a whole topic in itself.
Yeah.
I would refer to as inner fragmentation. We
Mm.
have kind of like opposing thought forms vying for supremacy. One thought form believed is in opposition to another thought form, and it leads to a sense of division and fragmentation.
Mm.
So we could just spend a long time talking about that. But I'd like to steer this one a little bit more towards, once the kind of the fire was put out, which is on the emotional level, you may find that resolution on the emotional level, it doesn't give rise to the quantity of thought forms that were just an expression of a disharmony on that deeper emotional kind of level. So I kind of learned that, that a lot of resolution for me has taken place in the willingness to feel and to actually validate rather than fight, to validate emotional content.
Mm.
And I've learned this through what you could call the work of the inner child. This is kind of a well-known trajectory of therapeutic modeling called inner child work. And in inner child work, you kind of what there are kind of three components, of inner child work, without again unpacking this because this is another huge topic.
Mm.
But one of the primary ways to meet emotion, without it you never really find resolution, is validation.
Mm.
So with emotional content, it's not, why am I feeling this? How do I get rid of it? We normally go in to ourselves like we're a problem that we need to fix. But when you look at it, the way that we go into ourselves, from the perspective of the conflict, it's like the ego goes in to try to fix the ego.
Mm.
And if we go in that way, it's already quite violent. It's already destined to fail.
Mm.
The very way that we go in, if we go into like, I need to get rid of this part of me and resolve it, because the very going in that way is already a rejection of something deeper.
Just to clarify, because in what I hear coming up, and I want the viewers to be able to get this if they're at all confused. It's like going into a relationship and seeing someone, let's say for me, it's a girlfriend, and I say, oh, she's got this problem, this problem, this problem. That's okay. I'll go in and fix it during the relationship rather than accepting her as she is. Is that at all similar?
Yeah, like it's kind of like, if I'm going to go in and be with myself, first it's almost like, how am I going to meet that?
Yeah.
If I'm going to put on my commando hat, pull off a couple of big swords, stick a whole bunch of grenades and gun belts on, and now I'm going in.
Yeah.
That the very way of going in like that is already part of the problem.
Yeah.
So, there's something to be said around, in kind of yogic circles, we kind of look at the importance of kind of like tenderness and kindness towards emotional content that hasn't found resolution. So it's not that we're really problem solving or trying to fix ourselves. There never really was a problem, but there's more like emotional content that never really got validated. It never really got unpacked. It never really got felt. It never really got acknowledged. We never really found our freedom in it.
Mm.
And because we didn't, there's some kind of replay in motion. So can you feel the trajectory of this? It's such a kind, intelligent, deeply held, nurturing openness that would meet yourself in such a way that it's so far away from a battleground.
Mm.
It's so far from that perspective. It's there's what we call curiosity, and curiosity is like a heart quality. It doesn't go in as an intellect to kind of like fight, resolve, fix, which is a very masculine kind of way of doing something. But we need to give more tribute to our women here, because the woman knows this already. They've got so much more, I would say, emotional intelligence. Maybe that's a bit of a generic statement, but to what I've seen, the masculine has its place in going in to fix something. I know the problem, I can come up with a solution, but we apply that to kind of emotional content and feeling based ways, and that really doesn't work. That's not the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
And to just, to just really let something unpack itself, and to really let something be felt, and for something to be welcomed, and to show up as a masculine, which is really masculine in one way that I talk about it, is just the willingness to show up.
Mm.
So to show up for your own emotional content in a way that isn't really judging it.
Mm.
You're kind of like, I wonder what's going on in me now. I'm having a really strong reaction. Let me really feel that.
Yeah.
Let me let this reaction talk. I'm here for you. Feels like a very young reaction. I'm here for you. I don't even know what you are yet, but I get a sense of rage or pain, or I get a sense of, whoa, let me feel what it's like to really feel that. And if I was to let those words have voice, what would it say? It's saying, back off, and whoa, that's strong. I wonder where's that coming from in me? That seems to be coming from, I feel like I'm talking now to my best friend, or I'm talking to my dad, or I'm talking, so it's kind of like, and I validate, maybe there's a very good reason that I had that probably that feeling in me never got validated of, so this has the right to exist. I'm not going to condemn this. For whatever reason, this emotion is really here. I validate it. I see you. I'm here for you. And validity is a crucial step in emotional resolution. One of three stages.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I realize I haven't gone anywhere near really answering this question. But the 2 points I wanted to give was, one, you can't really, I don't see it as a battleground. I think we need to come in to content within our own psyche with a way that's really tender and kind. The second thing is that you can't really take things that are on the emotional level through the intellect. You really need to come down and start to really settle into a little bit more clarity on, I don't even know what it is that I'm feeling. I just know that I'm not feeling happy, but it can be such a quagmire of confusing feelings. I don't even know where to start with that. So it can be really useful to this is what I mean by unpack, just resting a little bit more with the content in the body. And what I've learned is that when there is content on that kind of emotional layer, the mind will come in and it will layer interpretation. It's because of this, it's because of this, it's because of this, it's because of this. And then it will surround that with a whole satellite system of thoughts and judgments. So the mind does that. The mind judges. It kind of like interprets and it judges. And for me, the value is in kind of like just noticing that that's what the mind's interpreting it. That's how the mind's interpreting it. But that's actually getting in the way of me actually just showing up for the feeling itself. I'm not really going to pay too much attention to too much of the mental content here. I'm more just going to really just let myself experience this kind of what I would call some kind of energy, some kind of movement in my body, and just give that a chance, an opportunity, without layering it with the kind of judgments. And I know that you got interested a little bit in Hakomi. We talked about that recently, and that's very much nicely bringing us full circle into a very lovely psychotherapeutic model called Hakomi, which very much uses that as a psychotherapeutic tool that was actually based on not really paying too much attention to the story or the narrative around something, but actually letting the energetic emotional component kind of somehow unpack. And in the unpacking of that emotional content would also be the resolution.
That's fascinating.
But we don't actually see it like that. We see, I've got to push the feelings down and then kind of somehow come to do some kind of top-down mental strategy that's going to make everything feel better. And it never does, because it wasn't the right tool for the job.
So in saying that you had said you didn't really answer the question, or maybe you want to round it, or took a long shortcut, or as my dad used to say, we're going to take the long shortcut. I feel that you did, because I'm very grateful that you answer it in that way, because it was a little bit of a trick question way, because people, and how I used to view and how my mind still tries to convince me, is that it is a battle. That this is a battle, and what the battle ends up creating is more of a battle. So, for anyone who, understands, as we go up into our head and we think more, if we can think more, then our mind still gets to be in control, and we don't have to feel the feelings, because the more it seems like a battle, the more we continue to battle. It's like, that's a battle. I'm going to deny it for this reason. We're going to go eat some food to distract. I'm eating this food because I don't want to deal with that right now. I just don't have the time. I've got work tomorrow. Oh gosh, and I've already done so much already today. I'll be tired. And then it's on and on like a tape recorder. And when we, as you said, when we realize it's not a battle, there's none of this can be there. None of the mind, none of that battle can be there. It is simply as it is for what it is. And that is both for me one of the most simple things, yet some of the most complex, because the mind has no seat in there. It's like trying to, it's got no seat. So I wanted to thank you very much for coming on to this podcast, Rowan. I really appreciate it. And I wanted to finish with one very simple question, which is if you had a message to share with the people listening, a few sentences, maybe one sentence, or even it could be a word, one word or less, that a message that you feel comes from your heart is your truth, or something that will help to inspire people to live their truth, what would that be?
Oh boy, that might be the toughest question, Haki. That might be the toughest question yet. I think it's around tenderness, being gentle, because the violence outside is directly proportional to the violence that we are with ourselves inside.
Oh, yeah.
So it really, the question kind of is around, using everything as an opportunity to move in the world with a little more ease in yourself. And I'm aware that for me, it's been a 25-year exploration that I'm not talking about it from any sense of completion, because I feel for me, it's just like an ongoing deepening. But I would just kind of encourage that it's a really beautiful trajectory to kind of be on. It's a really beautiful, I can honestly, hand on heart, I think, say that every year that I kind of explore, somehow on some way I'm more at ease than the previous year. And it's been around through just sitting with different teachers, getting different perspectives, sitting with different therapists, going through different processes, and seeing through a lot of what the mind is saying, learning how to resource myself, noticing that kind of like, you can only really look into these things when you feel well resourced. So I'm a yoga teacher, so I always explore what is it to be resourced? How does it only really when we're resourced do we really feel we have the capacity to then actually integrate something? And so for me, it's about, I would just say, don't take it too seriously. Have fun with it. Don't be too serious about all this kind of stuff. There is stuff that we can unpack. There is stuff that we can see through. We're going to feel a lot better at the end of it. It's the deeper that we live in it, the deeper truths that we see through. It's going to be beneficial for us and all those around us. It seems like a really scary process, but it's not really as scary as it seems. You could be brave, be honest, be brave, and on a deeper level, there's actually nothing wrong with you. On a deep level, there's really nothing wrong with any of us. But the ego really doesn't see. The ego comes from a perspective that there's so much wrong with me. So on a much deeper level, there really isn't anything wrong with you. But on a human level, we're always going to grow and learn. And let's let that whole process be seen from that kind of perspective, something which is inspirational. It's going to free us up in some way, and let the whole thing be kind.
Thank you so much. That was definitely felt in the heart. So thank you again, Rowan, for coming on, for joining and sharing your insights, your wisdom, your experiences. with all the listeners here to be able to give them some opportunity to self-reflect and learn and grow.
Great, Haki. I hope it's been useful to someone. Yeah, you're very welcome.
Beautiful.